It is another edition of Trade Targets. Frank Saravalli's lists always being updated over at Daily Faceoff. It's, as always, delivered to you by DoorDash. And Frank, couple new names appearing on the list. I want to start with the one that actually really caught my attention off the bat is Victor Olofsson out in Buffalo. This is a guy, 26 years old, pending RFA, only played in 158 career NHL games, but he has 42 goals in that span. What's leading to him being available in Buffalo? And if they do decide to move on from him, what kind of haul are they going to get?
Well, it probably starts and ends with the fact that he's a pending restricted free agent and a guy that had already previously filed for arbitration. So his last contract that he got, just a shade over $3 million a year from the Buffalo Sabres in 2020. Kevin Adams was the GM then. Was a decision after the arbitration filing, and kind of gives you an indication in terms of, it was a prove it type situation for Victor Olofsson. And the problem is when it comes to the next case, the next arbitration case that could happen because he is eligible as a pending RFA, is that number continues to probably climb a bit. Even though his production has dropped off a tad, he's now on track for 12 goals this season, which would be one less than he had in the shortened campaign last year. Is the arbitrator also looks at career numbers. And so you mentioned them, 100 plus points now for his career, 42 goals. He's certainly going to be a guy that's probably in line for a bit of a raise. And perhaps it's one that the Buffalo Sabres don't want to pay. So Victor Olofsson, we believe, is available. I think the arbitration case with some of the guys that I had checked in with was somewhere around 4.25, potentially as high as $4.5 million. I think the one knock on Olofsson and his game, as he's a talented guy, no question, is that some of his play seems to come from around the perimeter. They wish he could get the puck to the middle of the ice more, wish that he would do a little bit more in the middle of the ice. So an interesting trade chip if you're talking about the Buffalo Sabres and potentially trying to shake things up a little bit.
Is that a guy you think, just quickly, a contender would be interested in, or do you think it's maybe a team with maybe a more long-term look is looking at acquiring?
I think that's the best part about Victor Olofsson and exploring the possibility if you're the Buffalo Sabres is it should attract a number of teams, not just potentially contenders that would be looking for a piece, but also other teams that are looking to reshape their roster as well.
Goaltending. A lot of teams are in the market for an upgrade between the pipes as well, and you have a couple of new names appearing on the list and throwing themselves into the goalie market.
Yeah, and it starts with Braden Holtby from the Dallas Stars, also includes Anton Forsberg from the Ottawa Senators. And really what you're seeing here, the Dallas Stars are still very much in wait and see mode, but the way that Jake Ottinger has played, the way that he's grabbed that crease, I think has really opened the Dallas Stars up to the idea of potentially moving on from Braden Holtby if you can find the right assets in return, because you still have Anton Khudobin, and he's in a position where an easy call up with Ottinger to ride out the remainder of the season also allows any young guys you have playing in Texas to get a little bit more ice time down in the AHL, some more starts. So to me, I think that the Stars would have to be exploring the market for Holtby, even though with some of their other guys like John Klingberg and like Joe Pavelski, maybe even an Alex Radulov, they're pending unrestricted free agents as they're trying to say, hey, well, we're trying to get in the playoffs. Let's give our team every opportunity possible. Again, coming off of a really disappointing loss to the Arizona Coyotes on Sunday night, losing to the 31st ranked team in points percentage while your team is still in the mix. I think you'd have to consider moving on from Braden Holtby. And Anton Forsberg, a little bit of a similar conversation in the sense that it seems like Matt Murray has found his game a bit in Ottawa again since coming back from that recall from Belleville. We've talked about it on the Blue Paint with Mike McKenna, and that it seems like Matt Murray has gotten his confidence back. Forsberg is a guy that's a pending free agent, is going to need a new deal. I think the Sens are interested in having that conversation about potentially trying to keep Forsberg, but potentially some low-hanging fruit, a possibility to get a nice asset back in return if a team's looking for a guy in Forsberg who has really played quite well this season on an Ottawa team that hasn't had a lot of support in front of him or a lot to speak of.
The goaltending market's interesting at the deadline. Like, I'm putting together a piece for Oilers Nation. Obviously, Edmonton could be in the market for a goalie, about just what deadline moves typically look like for goalies. You had the Leonard trade a few years ago when he found his way to Vegas. But when you look back, like, you almost have to go all the way back to when Ryan Miller was traded to the St. Louis Blues to find the last time like a first round pick was involved and a real impact number one starter was moved. Like it is a rare thing to see that happen. And this year, with so many names on your trade targets list, you would imagine that we will see that kind of move, right?
Well, I think the other part of it on the goalie front is that you could potentially be looking at teams trying to get ahead of what's coming in the summer, the annual summer game of goaltending musical chairs. Like think about a guy like Joonas Korpisalo, for instance. His numbers haven't been great in Columbus, a couple years now in the eights with a save percentage, but he's a pending unrestricted free agent. There is no question in my mind that he's moving on. He's not coming back to the Columbus Blue Jackets. Why wouldn't they trade him to a non-playoff team if that team's interested, just to get a jump on the market? So I think, you look at a guy like Korpisalo, you look at Georgiev, who we mentioned just previously in talking about Igor Shesterkin. These are guys that make sense for potentially contenders that need a goalie, like a Vegas Golden Knights team. You see Thompson and net for the Golden Knights. Like Robin Lehner's hurt. They need a goaltender. That's what's separating them. A little bit of irony, a team that traded the Vezina Trophy, the reigning Vezina Trophy winner, away for nothing and is overloaded at just about every other position and certainly on the cap. They need a goalie. So Alexander Georgiev is another name that had popped up with the Vegas Golden Knights. The goaltending market has a lot of different facets to it this year. And I wouldn't be surprised at all to see a non-playoff team jump into the fray to try and get a guy that they believe in.
Last one quickly here. Mark Giordano is a veteran I looked at on the list, and it's interesting to me because his play's obviously fallen off a little bit, but I still believe there would be teams out there who value the intangibles he brings on the ice and off the ice as well if you're gearing up for a playoff run. But $6.75 million. I mean, if Seattle keeps half of this, how long do you think the list of teams would be that are actually interested in a guy like Giordano?
I mean, I think there would be interest for sure. I think Seattle keeping half is probably a prerequisite to start for almost every contending team that would be involved. I still think for Seattle, the price is probably going to surprise some people. I think this is a second round pick transaction for Giordano. I don't think he's in the first round pick category or territory. And I think the Kraken to this point have thought that he may be. So there's another facet of it too that exists with the Kraken, and that we've mentioned this before. They're a team that probably needs to wait until a little bit closer to March 21st to begin pulling the trigger on some of the players that they have, because they don't have a full-fledged, fully formed minor league system. They're in their first year of existence. They only have, 10 pro players that are down there. Not a lot of warm bodies to call up and try and finish off your season. So just something to keep in the back of your head as you think about Seattle getting closer to the deadline. I don't think conversations have really ramped up yet on the trade market yet for Mark Giordano, but I think when it's all said and done, still seeing him in that second round range.
There you go. Another interesting edition of Trade Targets. The article will be up at Daily Faceoff today as well if you want to give it a read and see who else could potentially be on the move. As always, the segment delivered by DoorDash. Promo code DFODD, or if you're south of the border, DFODDUS gets you 25% off and no delivery fees on your first order. That's a wrap on another edition of Trade Targets.